years ago, I just woke up one morning with a desire to write fiction again, with a story in my head. I wrote 100,000 words in 6 weeks. I don't consider myself a romance writer in this sense that I only write romance. Romance usually is defined as books that the romance is the plot. I write books with romance in them. It usually plays a supporting role in the plot, but it isn't the plot. Science fiction is the dreams of our future. Fantasy are the dreams of our past.
This podcast is part of the Blueberry Network at blueberry.com. That's blueberry with no ease.com.
Right on America is brought to you
by a generous grant from the Built on Dreams Media Network,
as well as the Sims Media Foundation,
and from listeners like you.
Stand by, please. Rolling on 6 now. On 6.
We're on 6. EQ in. Roll tape. This is Adam Scull. Welcome back to another edition of the Right on America podcast. Jackie Patrick started writing fiction when she was 15, and like most aspiring writers, thought her work terrible, immature, cliched drivel. But she kept at it, even going to college for her creative writing degree, before she understood how useless such degrees tend to be for real-world applications. She also got used to the typical rejection letter. Eventually, she needed annoying things like food, clothing, and rent, so she got a real job and ended up finishing her degree in paramedicine. Since then, she's gained 19-plus years of experience as a paramedic, and that's after joining the Army, which paid for her degree. Of course, becoming a medic and owning skills takes lots of energy, so her writing got derailed for many years but never forgotten. Then, a wonderful thing happened. She woke up one morning with the fire to write fiction again. Sure, she had written plenty of medical reports, she had been published online by writing medical articles, and was paid to write for a crafts blog, but hadn't felt a particular desire to write fiction in nearly a decade. Jackie Patricks, welcome to the Right on America podcast.
Hello, I'm glad to be here.
You started writing at 15. What was it that got you started?
I was in junior high, and I had just finished reading Barbara Hamiley's The Dartmouth trilogy. The first one was The Time of the Dart. It was the first time I'd ever read fantasy, just was so sucked into her world and her writing that I just decided that I wanted to be able to do the same thing. I wanted to write. Obsessed me from that day forward.
It really carried you away.
Absolutely. I can't really just grab me.
What's your favorite kind of book to read?
Science fiction and fantasy are usually the genres I go for first. All knowledge is worth having, so I will read anything. I'll read the cereal box at breakfast, actual science journals, partially because of my interest with my job. I'll read anything.
How did you like getting a creative writing degree?
Education, like electronics. You can never overinvest in education and electronics. My actual experience in college wasn't really the best. I ended up switching my degree from creative writing to paramedicine, and I worked as a paramedic now for 20 years, but I have a lot of formal education in creative writing up until that point, which has served me very well.
Did you enjoy the creative writing classes you took?
Yeah, actually I enjoyed more than my other classes.
Why did you switch your major?
I needed to find some sort of marketable skills and switch my major to pay for annoying things like food and rent. I ended up switching to paramedicine, ended up becoming a paramedic.
Did you find time as you were working as a paramedic to do any writing?
The shifts for paramedics run 24 hours on, 48 hours off, because initially I thought I'd be able to write in between calls and on my days off. Unfortunately, the first few years of learning how to become a paramedic are so incredibly stressful that it pretty much just took over my life for the first 5 to 10 years. Being a paramedic, it's one of the best jobs you'll ever love to hate because it takes a lot out of your life. I started working for a online company that catered to paramedics who need to recertify their license. I wrote medical articles. 3 years ago, I just woke up one morning with a desire to write fiction again, with a story in my head. I wrote 100,000 words in 6 weeks. My husband was like, "What are you doing?" He'd never actually seen me obsessed with writing like I had been when I was younger.
It just spilled right out of you.
Yes.
You have your manuscript, you start shopping it around, and you get rejection after rejection. How did that make you feel? Was it hard or stressful for you?
It is painful. It would have been 20 years ago, but this time around, I hadn't really been aware of the self-publishing so much. I mean, I knew it was out there, but I hadn't been paying attention. It just didn't matter anymore to me what other people thought. The more I started looking into it, I just decided that I was just going to go for it. The rejections this time around didn't hurt so much. A lot of writers still need this validation, traditional publishers saying that, yes, you are worthy of being published. But what they don't understand, I think, and what I wouldn't have understood 20 years ago, was that it's irrelevant. They're going to publish what they can make money off of, what they can mass produce. It doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad.
You have 2 books out now?
I have 1 full novel and several short stories. I'm working on 2 more right now.
The book titled Downgrade.
That's a short story, what I call it, experimental paramedic fiction. It's first person, and it puts you in the viewpoint of a rookie paramedic. I wrote that literally experiment because people always ask me, what's it like to be a paramedic? Grossest thing you've ever seen. It's a very short story, just over 2,000 words.
What's the reaction been to such a graphic rendering?
Mostly positive. I put warnings out. If somebody is a reader who doesn't like graphic, tense writing, you're not going to enjoy this. I put it through friends and coworkers first. My paramedic coworkers all agreed, felt that it was very realistic.
Do you work with a critique group?
I had that 20 years ago. Now I have a group of friends online that I have fostered of writers, and I have a few that I've collected through Nano. I've done Nano 2 years in a row now that I meet with a few times through the year. But for the most part, I run it through some friends and some writers, beta readers online. Writers groups are important, but at some point you get to a level of too many cooks spoil the broth. You just need to find your own voice and a few trusted friends who will be very honest with you and move on. Stay in these groups. You keep hearing opinions over and over and over again. They will just destroy you.
Tell me more about Dreams of the Queen, your novel.
It's science fiction romance. The romance is an integral part of the plot, but it's not the driving force of the plot. It's specifically about Cass, astrophysicist, who starts off the story. She's a little temperamental and a little unstable, who has been having dreams her whole life about another world and builds a wormhole to literally go find that world.
Do you consider yourself a romance writer?
Yes and no. I don't consider myself a romance writer in the sense that I only write romance. Romance usually is defined as books that the romance is the plot. I write books with romance in them. It usually plays a supporting role in the plot, but it isn't the plot.
It's more like the subplot of your book.
Yes, a subplot. But if you were to take the romance out, then the rest of the plot would crumble. It's a very key element.
What is it that drives you with science fiction?
I heard it a long time ago, probably when I first started writing. I really think it's a good definition of it. Science fiction is the dreams of our future. Fantasy are the dreams of our past.
When you write science fiction, do you draw upon the classics from the 50s through Star Wars? Do you draw upon films such as The Fifth Element? Or do you draw upon new and unknown areas?
Oh, that's a good question. With Dreams of the Queen, I'd say I definitely took it into new areas. Some of my reviews have actually specifically quoted as it being original work, as much as any work can be original these days. But by the same token, I really love a lot of the old classics, the books, the movies. That's where I came from. Really enjoy playing with the old tropes, but I like seeing how far I can push them and reinventing them, which I think is the whole point of being any kind of artist. How far can you take the old ideas and reinventing them to your vision?
You bring up the term reinvention. Does that come easy to you?
It didn't 20 years ago. I wouldn't say easy. I have so many things that I dump into my subconscious now that it has gotten easier. There's nothing really easy about it. As far as cliches, my BS meter has gotten higher. When you come across something, you just know that, oh, danger, danger, don't go in that direction.
Lost in Space. The robot says, danger, Will Robinson, danger.
And yet, I talk in movie lines. Those are the best because everybody understands them. And yet, you can't write something and use that unless you're using it as a parody or a joke or the other characters are using it in their conversations. Then you can play that way. It's all about how you use it.
How about an excerpt from Dreams of the Queen?
I'd be delighted. I do not understand why you are upset, Cass. This is the will of Tamat. She threw her hand up. Stop it, Jamin. Just stop. I don't know anything about Tamat or her will, and I certainly don't know anything about being presented to this master. Flitting his eyes over her shoulder, he saw his warriors staring at their exchange with vicious zeal. Their eyes reflected stray hints of the deadly sunlight filtering past the entrance. All but grin. He shifted from foot to foot, appearing ill at ease. This was not at all what he had expected. The queen, their savior, was not supposed to be wholly unaware of her destiny, was she? Half listening to Cass rant over her confusion and irritation regarding his herding her to the city, previously unknown to her, which shocked him, to meet Master, also unknown to her. Like some prize heifer being taken to slaughter, he had no knowledge of what a heifer was, but reassured her that being presented to Master had nothing to do with slaughtering. So you say, you could be leading us all into a trap. I've been acting like an idiot. Why should I trust you, she said. You doubt my word? Jamin's chin jutted and his chest puffed. He knew his warriors overheard her when they shuffled their feet and dropped their gazes. She shamed him. I doubt everything right now, Jamin. Her voice, head and shoulders dropped, creating an unfathomable need in Jamin to comfort her. Why should I offer her solace when she dishonors me, he thought. How can she doubt after all I've done? Fear spiked his gut, thinking of Cass turning from him, disappointment in her eyes. So he did the only thing that felt right. He dropped to one knee and bowed his head low until his hair brushed the stone floor. Forgive me, Master, I serve Tamat's will, my queen, my Cass.
Science fiction romance authors. Is it a crowded field?
More than you would think. Mostly women, quite a few. Unfortunately, most traditional publishers don't want to touch science fiction romance. Generally reject it.
What do you like most about writing? What do you like least?
I really just get into my head and the worlds that I build and the characters. When I write, I generally write third-person point of view, but I write deep third-person point of view, and I become that character.
What do you like least?
A Tommyknocker that Stephen King created, so that it just goes right from my head to the computer, and I don't have to type, and I don't have to write. My hands won't cramp. This slow process, it takes so long to get it from my head to the computer. Got 12 other ideas, and for every chapter I get done, a whole other book idea crops up in my head.
You have all these multiple projects going on in your head. How do you keep them straight?
I have notes. I just take basic notes and save them in my computer. I don't do outlines. I used to do outlines when I was younger. I found that it just completely stifled my desire to write anything. Frustration in my brain of wanting to get the manuscript out of my head, then I continue to write it.
Beginning, middle, or end?
And the most trouble, sometimes the ending, it's almost like a breakup.
How do you come up with your story ideas?
Most of the time, from dreams. I wake up in the morning and I'll have a whole idea in my head, or the basic premise of one. And then I just go from there and I invent characters or I stop and do research as needed.
Your books are self-published?
Yes.
Take us through the process.
It's a lot of work, incredibly painful. It takes a lot of research. It's one of those things that even after you've done all the research, and I'm one of those research people, I'll read and read and read before I take the first move. Even after all that, there's still something you're going to miss. At some point, you just have to dive in. My first books, I've used CreateSpace for the paperback. I found them to be fairly reliable. Other people like Lightning Source, but they have certain caveats that you have to agree to, like returns that you have to pay for, so you have to decide how much money you want to invest into it. Create Space has been good for paperbacks, but you need to research. Don't skip the how-to manuals on formatting, how to format